Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Bryce is Right. And my name is Bryce Cornell. You guys know who I am. I'm all about promoting secular humanism and positive atheism. And today I'm pretty excited. I have a special interviewee. That's a word, right? It is for the purposes of this show. She happens to be a friend of mine. We've known each other for a little while now. And she's the newest member of my show. She's also going to be a regular contributor. So please welcome co-producer and part-time co-host, maybe if she wants the job, Sunny Shell. Sunny.
Hey.
Come on down. You are the next guest on The Bryce is Right.
That's fun. It's fun. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to being a bigger part of the show. So thank you for allowing me to contribute and be a part of it.
Yeah, and we had previously collaborated on The Empathetic Atheist, along with the other producers, Wes and Skid. So it's kind of like we just brought the team back together again, just on a different platform.
Yep, absolutely. I had to take a little bit of a hiatus right as all of that transition was going because of my job and personal life. And I'm just really excited to be getting back into it again.
Yeah, and I'm glad to have you here because you were always helpful with, recruiting guests for us and just doing a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that I'm not very good at. But you're kind of one of those multifaceted people because you could go in front of the camera, you could go behind the camera, you could control the camera, you're like kind of a jack of all trades, so that's why I was really excited to get you.
Yeah, I'm used to wearing lots of hats, and that's primarily because I'm a mom of a lot of kids, and in my professional job, which I won't really get into, but I will say that I am in upper management of a nonprofit. And so I have to wear a lot of different hats and juggle a lot of things. And so that helps with this as well.
Right. Awesome. Well, welcome to the Atheist Network group. That is our parent channel. And I'm sure when the other guys meet you, they'll be happy to have you. It's nice for me to have a little bit more female representation because I think that we're doing okay with it, but it still seems when I watch a lot of these atheist shows and secular humanist shows, it still seems slanted slightly more male to me. And I don't know if you've noticed that, but what is your take on that?
Yeah, I don't really understand why that is. I think that there are a lot of women atheists. I just think that there's not a lot of representation, and I'm just not sure why. We have great ones like Shannon Q, Vila Bianca, Jenna Belk. We have some great ones, but it seems to be a male-dominated place, and I'm not quite sure why that is. But I'm all about getting some more female representation.
Yeah, and I think V may be non-binary, so I don't want to.
Yes,
I'm not 100% sure, but I think they are non-binary. So, but yes, which is even more of a reason for additional. We want everybody. One of the things I did on the first live episode I had a group of Black atheists on here, which I never thought I would see in my life. There are some Facebook groups out there, but it's still kind of a fringe idea. And so I'm really looking to diversify the voices in the atheist community. And so that's kind of what I'm all about. But let's talk about you. You have not really told your background story or your deconversion story before. Which I was kind of surprised about, but I figured this is a great opportunity, and I'm honored that you decided to do that on my show. So, who is Sunny Shell? What were you before? What are you now? And how did you get here?
Well, it's a big question. So, I was born into the Seventh-day Adventist tradition or religion, which is an interesting thing. It's kind of along the same lines as the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses, because it was just like they have Joseph Smith and the others. We had Ellen G. White, who kind of created our religion in that exact same time. that they were building those. It was very controlled. For instance, when my dad asked my mom to marry him, the way that they did that was instead of a wedding ring, because you couldn't wear jewelry, they had watches. So you had your watch on either your right or your left hand, depending on whether you were single or married. Yeah, it was kind of.
Is that like a doctrine of the church, or was that just specific to your church?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure. That's just what the ones that I was around. That's how they distinguished that.
Right.
There was a lot of guilt because thought crimes were a big deal. So whatever you thought, if you looked at someone and thought that they were attractive, that was lust. And so a lot of people in the Seventh-day Adventist church tend to have a lot of guilt and shame just piled on. On top of that, my parents went to school in the Seventh-day Adventist Academy. That's where they met. They worked in the Seventh-day Adventist furniture factory.
Wow.
Then my dad started selling Bibles for a living. Everything was tied to the church. Seventh-day Adventists are called Seventh-day Adventists because they believe that the Sabbath is on Saturday and not.
I was going to say that's really the only thing I knew about them is that they go to church on Saturday. But that, and I think that's what most people think when they hear Seventh-day Adventists. Oh, those are the Christians that go to church on Saturday.
Yeah.
But beyond that, yeah, I never knew.
It's odd. There's very strict rules on what women, the female role and the male roles and that sort of thing. I was really fortunate in that we left the Seventh-day Adventist church when I was still fairly young. I was in elementary school still. Mm-hmm. And what happened was that my dad, we were destitute poor, like way poor. We lived in government housing. My dad actually had a book. He passed away, but he had a book that he was keeping. It was like a finance book. Mm-hmm. And he put in there, he showed it to me when I was older, that we were walking along the park and I found a quarter on the ground. And my dad put in there that, and it was my given name, which I will not repeat, but he said my given name, so I'll say Sonny. Sonny found a quarter, praise God, God is watching out for us. And he put it in his budget, in his finance journal, because we were so poor.
Wow. So
he went to a financial planner to try to figure out what to do. And we were tithing a large amount. And he said, this is what made him change. What made him first start thinking is that the guy that was talking to him said, well, let me ask you this. Do you think that the Lord would want you to tithe to the church or to feed your kids? What do you think would be more important to God? Mm-hmm. And it was like a light bulb moment for him. Mm. And it was maybe a year later that we were completely out of the Seventh-day Adventist church.
Well, I'm glad. I will just say before you go on, I'm glad that was the light bulb moment for him and that he didn't go to the passage of the Bible that says, where Jesus says, anyone who loves their family more than me is not worthy of me, because that could have led to you still being in dire straits, So you said it was like a light bulb for him. And to me, that's kind of a self-evident thing that anyone who loves their kids should do. I don't care what your religion is, but didn't mean to interrupt. I just... That blows my mind when it takes someone saying something so obvious to make you, reconsider your position.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you are in the middle of all of that, you don't see the obvious. And so anyway, it wasn't long after that we left the Seventh-day Adventist church. Mm-hmm. What that meant is that we left a lot of our extended family. Because they were all on both sides, very rooted in that church. Interestingly enough, my parents did not ever go to church after that. They visited different churches when coworkers would want them to go to church or whatever. But they kind of got out of organized religion after that. They said that they believe in God, but they believe that God is there everywhere. And so you can worship him at home just as well as you can at church. Mm-hmm. And they kind of, it because of all that they had been through, it was like, that's all legalistic. The church is just legalistic, and it's all a man-made construct. We can be devout Christians in our own way. And then over time that changed. By the time that, maybe 10 years ago, mm-hmm. my dad basically said he was an atheist. My mom did too. When my dad died about almost 2 years ago, he had all of us sit down and he said, listen, I want you guys to know I've lived the best life that I could. I've made a lot of mistakes, but I've also done a lot of good. And there is nothing after this. What we have shared is what there is. And I'm okay with that. And I hope that I live on in your memories, both the good and the bad, but don't weep or, think you're going to see me in heaven somewhere. It's just,
that is a rare,
this is all there is.
That's a rare thing. Usually you hear, and I don't know how accurate this is, but I know that many Christians believe that for people who grow up without religion, that they're more likely to turn to religion when they get close to the end of their life, when they're facing it's that old expression, there's no atheists in foxholes, or when you're dying of cancer and you're on your deathbed, that's when people start praying to God. People in prison find God conveniently, but it's usually when you're like at the end and everything is like the worst it's going to get, and it looks like this could be it, is where people become more religious. And I think that they like to use this as some sort of argument that, for why everyone should turn to Jesus and turn to God and all that sooner in their lives. But in your father's case, it was the opposite. He started off very religious and then realized that the thing that he was believing didn't make sense and ended up passing away in peace.
Yes.
So that whole idea that you need religion to be at peace at the end of your life, that didn't seem to be the case in your father's case.
That's correct. And in fact, my mom and I were just having a conversation last night about this. We were talking about where we live, I know you hear this, everybody hears this a lot. I live in such a conservative place and such a religious place, but really where we live is like, it's crazy. If you look up the demographics for where I live, we are 98%. And historically, since the beginning of this county, 98% evangelical, Southern Baptist, ultra-conservative, fundamentalist Christian. 98%. So to say I'm in like the armpit of Trump land, I am not kidding you. It really is, which is why we don't talk about stuff around here. So my mom was talking about how it feels like we're stuck in the 1950s and how friends of hers, she's getting close to 70 now. Friends of hers are, as their loved ones are either passing away or they're getting sick or whatever, it's like they have a much harder time with that. It tends to stick with them. And she was saying, I don't understand. She said, we've, our little close-knit family, I have two brothers, my mom and their sibling, their spouses and my husband. It's like we have managed to navigate the death of my dad in a way that most of the people around us don't seem to be able to do. And she said, I think it's because we understood from the get-go, when my dad was sick, that every day is precious and you live it to the best that you can. When something is rare, it becomes precious.
Yeah.
It's when you think, oh, I'll see them in the afterlife, that you don't honor it as much. And then all of a sudden it's gone and you're kind of stuck there. There's that fear, I think, an inner fear that people are not even able to verbalize or face, that maybe they're not going to see them again and they don't know how to handle that.
And coupled on top of that is probably regret as well, because if you have that fear, even just the slightest doubt, you're probably regretting that you didn't spend more time with the few precious moments that you had, or you didn't make the most of what you could have, because it's almost like you're taking this life for granted, you know. But yeah, it's a sad situation. Go on with your story though. I don't.
Well, it's interesting because we have been able to come out of it in a much better way. I will also tell you that we did not have a traditional funeral. So what we did, we looked for the absolute poorest, like a family-owned crematorium. It happened to be an African-American owned right in like the worst part of town, in a neighboring city. It was like the worst part of town, but they're very poor. They didn't have a lot of resources. And we said, we would rather you guys did this, because that's what my dad would do. He would love this. So when we got there, there was like crap everywhere. And like, it was obvious that like they live out of there at the same time that they try to work out of there. And so they just kind of stuck stuff places. So it
thanks Atheist Cats for the $5, by the way.
Oh,
we got super chat, so people already like you because that's the first super chat that we had in a while, so I'm attributing that to you. But
I'll attribute it to my dad's story because he's awesome. But anyway, we just we got a business, a family-owned business that was hard on their luck, and they were the ones who cremated my dad. It was pretty cool. They were just the best people ever. And then we invited only our closest family and friends to come for a memorial. That's what my dad would have wanted. He loved family and he loved friends and he loved to sit around and talk. So we did not have a funeral. We had a family get together, a party kind of, and we all, sat around for a weekend talking about him and the memories that we had. And we had his urn sitting there on the shelf. And the kids played games. We played cornhole. I mean, it was just like, and we ate great food and honored him. And we did not have a funeral. And after that experience, it was so cathartic and wonderful that's what I want now. I don't want a funeral. I want a party.
Yeah, I always said, not publicly, but to people who are close to me, that, I want a party when I die. And there's no way to really plan for this because you don't know if you're going to be dead before the people planning the party or if they're going to be dead before you are and you're planning whatever they wanted. So it's kind of just an idea. But, I talk about, why should the celebration of someone's life be miserable and just, I understand when tragedy happens and, you're angry because of the tragedy, but really it should be a celebration of life. And I have seen funerals like that. I used to be in the Air Force. I did honor guard for a while. I've been to a lot of, unfortunately, funerals, and most of them are the kind that you would expect. But every now and then, somebody has more of an uplifting, sort of positive thing where they just talk about the person positively, and it's a lot better.
Mm-hmm. It really is. I think so.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, so my dad, he sure did make a big impact on the rest of the family.
So I wanted to ask you about the because you mentioned that you went to an African-American person in another part of town, and you mentioned where you are is 98%. Basically, you said it's Trump land. So I'm wondering, is it? I'm guessing it's not racially or ethnically diverse.
No. So we have a pretty good portion of a Hispanic community, and there are some African Americans in the community. I'll tell you, this is a really good way to illustrate where I am. So there is. And
you don't have to get specific. If
oh yeah, that's fine. There's a pocket of African Americans, and when we first moved here, so I lived in Dallas, Texas, when I was in middle school and a little bit of elementary school, and when we moved here, I was shocked. It was a daily shock to me, the way that things are here. But there's a little pocket of African Americans, and one of the ladies that we first met, she was at the time probably in her 70s or so, and she said, "Oh, you don't have to worry about our blacks because our blacks know their place and they're good blacks." And that's the area.
Wow.
And my parents were like, what? I mean, it was just like you get smacked in the face with systemic racism right off the bat. And it was just a lot to take in. So, and I'm not one to shy away. So one of the reasons I don't talk much about things is because when I was in high school, I spoke up. And I was in 10th grade and they were talking, had about a paragraph of Black History Month. And one person in the class said, why, and this is all I remember, why do Blacks do? And that's all I heard. And I looked at the teacher thinking she's going to say something. And instead she said, well, you have to understand, Blacks are, and that's all I heard.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling like an out of body experience.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like you could replace Blacks with dogs, right? Or pigs.
Exactly.
Pigs roll around in slop because they're pigs. Duh.
Exactly. That's and I have this weird thing where when people say things like that, I don't look at it as I take it almost like personally. I'm not Black. There's no way I can know what it is to be Black. Just like I can't know what it is to be male or Hispanic or anything else. But for some reason, it feels like a personal attack, if that makes sense.
No, I get that. I mean, I don't think that you have to be any particular thing to feel offense when someone is attacking that thing. You know, I'm not Asian, but when I recognize that all of this hate and vitriol is going on with the Asian community and that people are getting beaten up in the streets because Trump decided to call it the China virus and the Kung flu and blame coronavirus on them, and people are like beating up Asians as if that's going to make the virus go away or that's going to make you be able to work. I don't know what the process is, but like I hate that, you know, because if they're going to do it to them, they're going to do it to me. That's kind of the way I look at it. If you hate any group, if you are a racist or anti-Semitic, if you don't like Muslims, gays, if you don't like a group of people because they're a group of people, something's wrong with you. And it's only a matter of time before you're going to just turn it around on me. And so that's why it doesn't have to be an attack on something I am. It's just the fact, it's the way that you are attacking another group that makes it offensive.
Absolutely. In that instance, as a 10th grader, and you know, when you're a young, at least this is back in the late 80s, it was, you did not want to stand out in any way, shape, or form.
Thanks, Bar.
And I remember standing up and saying to the class, like, I don't know, I like I told you, it was like an out-of-body experience. I said, I have not in my life seen such white trash as I see now. And then I knew this girl was gonna jump over a desk and punch me. And I'm not a fighter in that way. I'm not violent. And so I was like, oh crap, now what do I do? But I was just so upset by what they said. And so I started crying. And when I started crying, it like deflated the situation. But from that point on, I was called an N-lover. And when I went to get my diploma, I had groups of people walking past me calling me N-lover as they were walking to get
this is like in a public school, like in a public setting. And I don't know how old you are, but I'm guessing you're a little bit. You could be a little bit younger than me, but
well, I'll tell you because
you can give me the decade you went to school in, but it wasn't 1960s.
No, I graduated in 92.
Okay, so we're in the same era. I started high school in 92, but still same era. No, thanks, 1992 Bryce. Is not 1963.
Exactly. But that's when you're in this type of an area, and this all comes back to Christianity because honestly, there is a sense in Christianity that, and at least the people that I've been around, I can't say that for everybody. I don't know everybody. Sure. There's a sense that Black people are the descendants of, and it just went out of my head, is it Cain?
Well, there's the mark of Cain, but I think Ham was Ham. Also someone who was supposedly the father of the Black race, depending on which denomination you're in. So this is one of those areas where they believe that.
I mean, if
these
you,
are all religious people, right? It's 98% Christian.
absolutely, they are 98% Christian. I mean, they are also
98% racist.
98% racist, 98% homophobic, 98% bigoted. It's ridiculous. And so I've always spoken my mind until I got into the position that I'm in with my job, because now what I do is I work in a nonprofit where we help kids who have been physically and sexually abused. And we rely on community support, donations, and so forth. And so I have to walk a fine line now. I have to walk a fine line to be able to keep the community giving to the agency. And so I choose to shut my mouth a lot and focus on the benefits of the kids. Because just for instance, one church called me up one day and said, "Hey, I understand that you get money from the United Way and they promote abortion." And I'm like, first of all, we don't get money from the United Way. And second of all, that's not true. And I had to look it up. I started looking it up. The United Way only, they get funding and then they decide what that community wants. So if it's in a more progressive community, then that United Way may give to Planned Parenthood. But that's local dollars going to where that local community wants them to go. Right. Our community doesn't even have a Planned Parenthood anywhere near us. So of course they're not going to give to that. So looked up the number for the executive director of our local agency and said, give them a call. But that's the kind of thing. If they think that we're in any way associated with anything that they don't agree with, they won't support us. So I have to be extremely careful. However, I get my digs in because I have the sheriff, all of the police chiefs, the DA, all of them are on my board, and I have to teach them diversity training.
And I bet they love that.
They do, but I figure out some really cool ways of doing it to try to get them to understand that people are people. And if they want to be a better sheriff, a better police chief, a better DA, they're going to have to deal with people. They're just going to have to. So how can we do it in a way that makes their lives better and where they don't end up in the news? Nobody wants to end up in the news. And so I look for ways to kind of make it beneficial to them, to try to teach them how racism is not really beneficial, homophobia is not beneficial, transphobia, and so forth. So I figured out different ways of getting that in there.
Looks like Atheist Cats has a similar experience to you, being fired for teaching that, Moses was basically mythology, which it is, but
it's difficult.
I don't know what you're supposed to say in that situation because you can't teach religion. Did they expect you to say Moses actually parted the Red Sea, or that some people believe that, there was a guy called, I don't know. That's a whole nother. But wow. So here you are now I do have a couple of questions for you because I'm interested in this Seventh-day Adventist thing, and maybe you can fill in some holes, because someone replied earlier that you're the first Seventh-day Adventist that they've ever heard of or seen or met or whatever the case may be. I knew one guy when I was in the military who was Seventh-day Adventist, but we didn't talk a lot about religion. But so as far as Seventh-day Adventists go, what are they Christian? And if they are, how are they different from like Baptists or Pentecostals? Like, would the other ones consider them Christian?
I don't know if others would consider them Christian. They are considered a Protestant tradition. It's really hard to see how you would define them. Ellen G. White thought of herself as a prophetess. Like, she had some experiences. I think she was probably suffering from mental illness, but she took it as signs from God, and she was leading us to the truth. So it's very similar to Mormonism.
That sounds like a cult.
It does. Yeah, I would say, I know that Telltale had done the Jehovah's Witness on the bite model, but I disagreed with some of his rankings. There's a lot more control than what he had talked to a Seventh-day Adventist when he had done that. So I don't know if it's just the one that my family was in, if it was localized, but there was a lot of control. I would say, I mean, they believed in God, they believed in they were followers of Christ, but it was a very weird offshoot. I don't exactly know how to describe it. There were so many different things that they took. They were very biblical literalist, but yet there were things that they also incorporated that didn't have anything to do with anything in the Bible. Like, you couldn't dance. Well, as far as I can recall anyway, maybe there's something in there that I don't recall, but I don't recall there being anything in the Bible about not dancing.
I don't recall that either.
So, it was like that was being a loose person. Like, if you're dancing, then you're being too provocative.
I remember a movie when I was a kid called Footloose.
Oh yeah, Flashdance. Footloose.
And I thought it was fictional. I mean, it's a fictional story, but the whole idea of it seemed absurd to me, because it seemed like, in this alternate universe where dancing is forbidden, and then we're going to make a comedy about this alternate universe where dancing is forbidden. But evidently that's a real thing some places. And you grew up in a church that said that.
Yeah. Yep. Wow. I remember when I was growing up, like, we had to be very careful about what we wore. We had to be very conservative in our dress. So it just reminds me a lot of, like, the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons, and the fact that it has a specific person who decided to write all these books and lead people, kind of, it's just along the lines of Joseph Smith to me. And in fact, I think that Joseph Smith and Ellen G. White knew each other, but I could be wrong on that. I remember hearing something about that, though.
Did they believe in Trinity?
I don't think that they believe in Trinity, but I could be mistaken. Like I said, we got out of it when I was still in elementary school.
Right.
So I'm not as well versed in it. I remember the things that my parents would talk about.
And how old were you when you left that particular denomination?
I must have been, I would say, probably 8 when we left.
Yeah. And then you talked about moving on to other churches. You said it was, you found a Baptist church, and then I think you mentioned Pentecostal to me offline. But what were the different Christian churches you attended? And yeah, actually, so Jesse's saying there was a bunch of religious spin-off fan fiction. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah,
I thought it said factions at first. I read it too fast, but then fan fiction. That's a good one.
Factions, fan fictions.
Yeah. So the other denominations, and which one was the worst? Like, was that one the worst, or were they all?
Honestly, I feel like Southern Baptist is probably one of the worst, but
worse than the Seventh-day Adventist.
Probably because I got out of the Seventh-day Adventist when I was still fairly young. So, okay. My views are a little bit, altered in that way. I was just very interested. I've always been very curious. And so when I was in school, if somebody said, hey, come visit my church, I'm like, okay, sure. So I would visit all kinds of churches. The scariest one was one where I can't remember the type, but they spoke in tongues, and
that sounds like Pentecostal.
Yeah.
Pentecostal, holiness.
Yeah.
I think they're charismatic churches. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So the girl that I was spending the night, they had a sleepover, and she said, well, we're going to go to church in the morning. And she starts talking about how they speak in tongues, and then she started doing it, and I'm like, what in the crap is this? It freaked me out. And going to the church didn't make it any better. So I don't.
Wait a minute. She spoke to you in tongues outside of the church?
Yeah, like she wanted to show me what it was.
I didn't know you were allowed to do that. I didn't know that they could do that. I thought it was only a thing that happens when you're in church feeling the spirit during the, you know, the thing. So if they can demonstrate this whenever they want at any time, I'm wondering. Well, I'm not wondering if it's fake. I know that it's fake, but I'm wondering why they think that that's not a clue that this is not.
Well, I would imagine, as an adult now, I would imagine that her parents probably wouldn't have been too happy with that, but we were just kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think she was kind of trying it out herself. You know what I mean? She's kind of acting it out, and like, so here's what you're going to see when you get there, and here's what we do. So that was kind of interesting. I went to a non-denominational church.
Wow.
I went to a non-denominational for quite a while. It was right after I got married the first time. I'm divorced and remarried. And that was really bizarre.
So non-denominational is something I used to think I knew what non-denominational meant. I used to think, oh, that's just people, they just call themselves Christians and they don't, you know, belong to any particular, they can go to any church. And I even called myself non-denominational for a while back when I was that was the last version of Christianity that I was before I deconverted. But apparently that's not non-denominational. I guess non-denominational is actually a denomination of Christianity, and they're not like a super like liberal denomination that can go to any church and that, you know, is just plain old Christian. They're actually more of a fundamentalist, extreme version of Christianity, from what I've heard.
Yeah. Yep. They really are. It was quite interesting. They tried to expel demons from one of the congregants. People would fall out. It was very interesting. At one point, but right whenever I stopped going was when they had like it wasn't at the regular church. It was like I want to call it a conference, but that's not really what it was. But there was a traveling pastor that had come, or preacher that had come, and he was laying hands and people were falling down. And he came to me and he pushed on me and I didn't go down because I really thought that it was going to be something.
You weren't in on the gag.
I wasn't in on it.
They didn't consult you before they decided to.
Exactly.
Okay, here's what you're gonna do. When I put my hand on you, you fall down. You know, and you missed the meeting. They mistook you for somebody else who was at the meeting, and then so they were surprised when they got to you.
Yeah. Oh, he was very surprised. The look on his face was like, "What the crap?" And so he pushed me harder, and I still didn't go down. And then there was about 4 guys, and they all pulled me down as he pushed. Then they pulled me down, and I ended up on the floor looking up, and I thought, nah, this ain't for me. So I've gone to some really interesting.
Oz is talking about how they're all just a different version of, I don't want to use the word crazy because that's derogatory, but I mean, extreme. I'll just put it that way, you know? Yeah. And wow. So, okay. So you tried these different Christian denominations. They all had a different level of craziness, at least as far as you could tell. It didn't take, and then so you tried you went outside of Christianity because you were still a theist at this point. That didn't dissuade you from a God. You know, you recognized that these religions probably weren't it, and you were still looking for God at this point.
Yep, that's correct. So I was in college, and I was a non-traditional student. I already had a kid and I was married. So I go to college, and I had this really interesting professor who it was a elective class, and it was called Images, Altars, and Rituals. And I thought that was just the coolest thing. And she said, I think you would really like paganism. And so we had to do a project on something we weren't familiar with. And so it started out with paganism, and she introduced me to someone called Starhawk and the spiral.
This is now, wait a minute. This is a teacher, you said, or?
Yeah, a professor. And it was, she was non-practicing Jewish, but she was all about crystals and
pagan stuff.
And paganism with a strong feminist twist. And she thought that I would just be really into it. And I got big time into it.
So that's going to answer. I'm gonna let you finish, but this is going to answer my question of why did you try paganism? I'm sure you're going to get to that.
But it was really, really cool. I mean, it was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
There was trying to find a cool path in the middle of the woods and casting a circle and putting your crystals out. The four corners and the four seasons and everything was all nature and natural, and it just felt really cool. And so I started looking for covens and talking to people, and the more that I did that, the more kooky it seemed. I met this couple.
Did you believe in the supernatural at this time? Like, did you believe in, because it sounds like magic to me.
Yeah, I wanted to. I really wanted to, but I just couldn't. The more that I would try, like I got into tarot cards, which actually tarot cards are a lot of fun, but they're not real. If you do it just for the fun of it, it's great. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to get into like herbs and growing natural things and kind of making potions, and it all just seemed so cool. And it was so much from a departure from the fundamentalist Christian traditions that I've been a part of. It just seemed like a whole new world, and I dove right in. But when I really started to find a coven to join, that's when it got really, that's when it's like, I can't do this either, because these people be weird. I met this one couple at Starbucks, and they were telling me that I have to be really careful with my crystals, because you can have crystals that have negative energy, that the previous whoever had them, because you never know about a crystal. It could be thousands of years old, and it carries all this energy with it. And so there's certain things that you have to do to cleanse the crystals. And I'm looking at them, and it just dawned on me, this is really stupid. This makes no sense. I kind of went, what the crap am I doing?
What am I wasting my life with? You know?
Exactly. It just all seems stupid. And so that went to the side. And then I took another course, which was comparative religion.
Mm-hmm.
And oh God, I love that class.
But yeah, that's a great course, by the way. I took that as well, and I think everybody should take that, to be honest.
It is. It's great. But that introduced me to Taoism and Buddhism. Mm-hmm. And that definitely spoke to me a lot more. And so I really dove into that. I went to some Buddhist temples. I mean, I started doing meditation. I still think that it's very beneficial, but now I don't look at any of the spiritual stuff in it. There's actually a lot of secular Buddhist traditions, and mm-hmm. it's more about looking at the world through compassion and loving kindness. And I think it's beneficial no matter what. So I take
very not unlike humanism.
Yes, exactly.
Kind of a different version of humanism, right?
Exactly. So I definitely considered myself a secular Buddhist for a long time, for quite mm-hmm. a while. But I just decided to drop that. I can still take all of the good stuff from it, but I really felt like, you know what, there's just no supernatural crap, and I need to just stop with this. I have kids to raise, and I want them to be looking at things more objectively and using critical thinking skills. And so now we have great conversations. Where
how old are your kids?
Okay, so again, I'm
ballpark. Yeah, are they married. Under 10?
No, I have no kids under 10. I have 5 kids. Okay. The oldest is 27, and the 2 youngest are 15, and they go in between from there.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay, so so your kids are basically adults then.
Yeah.
You don't look old enough to have adult kids, but
thank you.
But I guess you kind of gave it away with your high school enrollment entry. So
yeah. I'm 47 years old, so wow. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. No, you don't look it. Yeah, I was just about to say that. That's Borg Skeptic, by the way, from Promethean Secular Frontier, which you'll be joining us over there as well at some point, I imagine. So, no more Buddhism. So what do you call yourself now?
I call myself an agnostic atheist, really.
Okay, so how do you define atheist and how do you define agnostic? Because sometimes we get pushback when people use those terms because they have a lot of different meanings. So what do you mean by atheist and what do you mean by agnostic?
Okay, so agnostic or Gnosticism has to do with knowledge. So it's not knowing. I do not know that there's not a teapot circling Mars. I mean, I don't know. So that's why I use the agnostic, because if I claim to know, that carries a burden of proof that I don't feel I need to carry. But atheist or theist has to do with belief. And I don't believe that there is any God of any sort. No one has actually been able to define a God that makes sense. I think that the God of the Bible absolutely does not exist just because of what we know through science. But any other God, I mean, people can define God in any way.
There's Thanks, Donna, for the $4.99.
Oh, yay. Thank you, Donna. Wow, this is awesome. Yay. But people
can. I'm telling you, it's all you. They like you.
No.
They see my face every week, but they're like, ooh, Sunny. She's bringing sunny new rays to brighten up the show.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Thank you guys, though. I hope you guys like to listen to me run my mouth all this time. It's weird talking about myself. I don't talk about myself very often, so this is kind of cool.
Well, this is your one big opportunity to do so, because then going forward, we get to talk about everybody else. So,
yeah, exactly.
So no good reason to believe in the biblical God, anyway, I think is what you were saying, or the Christian version of God. And then you said, or of any God, because you think that science explains.
Yeah, I mean, I just haven't heard of a coherent definition of a God. I mean, people can say, well, when I say the universe, I mean God, but well, fine, then my cup of coffee is a freaking God. I don't see any real logical definition of God that has convinced me. And so
now let me push back on that, Sunny, because according to the Kalam cosmological argument, God is a beginningless, changeless, timeless, spaceless, very powerful creator, personal creator. Okay. And so beginningless, timeless, changeless. I mean, I'm telling you a lot about God, aren't I?
That makes no sense to me. Prove that. You're adding something. I mean, basically, the most that we know, or according to all evidence, is that there was some type of an expansion. That's all we know. We don't know what happened before that. We don't know if there's something spaceless, timeless, blah, blah, blah. Prove it. If you make that claim, you are claiming something. All you need to do is prove it. And as soon as you prove that, I'll believe it. If you can prove it, I'll believe it. But I haven't seen anyone prove it.
No, and really, how do you prove all of these negatives? Because that's really the issue for me when you're describing a God and negative attributes. Beginningless, changeless, timeless, spaceless, immaterial. You're telling me what God is not, but you haven't told me what it is. It's like, and just what's the it's not a palindrome, but what do you call it when you reverse the letters of a word and you end up with another word? I can't remember what that's called, but the opposite of God is dog, and if somebody didn't know what a dog was and I was trying to convince them that I had a pet dog and they were like, well, how are you defining dog? And I said, oh, well, it's a featherless, wingless, flightless, non-egg laying, beakless, nestless pet that is very friendly. Did I tell you what a dog is? You have no more idea what a dog is when you ask the question than when I gave you the answer, and that's exactly what a lot of these definitions of God are. And so I don't understand why they don't see that. But
yeah, that I think that's the best way to describe that I've ever heard. I'm totally
well, thank you.
I'm going to use it.
I'll be here all week. So, all right. So, are you ruling out basically the supernatural then, or what do you think about the supernatural?
If anyone can actually prove the supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, basically what we're saying is that the supernatural is something that's outside of nature, right? So if it's outside of nature, how in the world can we know it or detect it? And also, if it's outside of nature, then how is it in any way impacting
Nature.
anything within nature? Because
Yeah.
as soon as it impacts something within nature, then we should be able to measure it and test it. Then it is a part of nature. So it's basically imaginary.
Yeah, it's also begging the question too, because the thing we're trying to get you to prove is that there is such a thing that outside of nature could be a thing. You know, you're positing a God, and we're like, where is it? It's outside of nature. Is there such a thing as outside of nature? Because that's just as unfalsifiable as the God claim. You know, so you're not really like, you're not helping your argument by positing something with all of these, you know, outside of space and time.
Right.
How is it doing anything? If it's not in time and it's not in space and it's not material, how could it be doing things? Is God doing things? I mean, you might as well be describing nothing at that point. I don't know. I'm ranting at this point.
No, but you're exactly right. It seems funny to me that we think about a God who is outside of everything and unknowable and all of this stuff, and yet he gives a crap whether I sleep with a man or a woman or a non-binary. If he's outside of this, if we can't even detect him, if we can't even know him, if he is beyond us, why does he care? I mean, I don't care what ants do. When I look at an anthill, I don't care if they are doing all kinds of, you know, really wild and, you know,
wild and crazy ant things.
Wild, yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
ants gonna ant.
I don't care.
You know?
Exactly.
Ants gonna ant.
We don't care about what ants do. Why would they think that a God would care what we do? Because we would be on the level of probably not just ants, but like, you know, microscopic things on the ants. Who cares?
All right, so no gods, and it sounded like you were ruling out the supernatural. So you're not open to like ghosts or any kind of life after death or other things like that. You answered that. So I think that that's reasonable. We appreciate skepticism here. And I think you made a lot of good arguments to support why you don't believe in these things. I'm biased and I agree with you completely. I'm curious though, are you concerned? This is the first time you're really sharing this about yourself, and this is on YouTube, so it's, you know, what's on the internet is on the internet. Are you concerned about maybe being outed as an atheist, given what you said about what you do for a living or your community? Is this a concern that you might have, that they might like click on this video or see it somehow? I don't know how they would find it, but
I'm not really worried. If it comes out, I'll deal with it at that point. I know it would be a definite game changer. I know for a fact I would lose my job because I have to be so careful. I mean, it's a constant thing. I have to represent the agency. However, I have stayed kind of in the closet in a sense for as long as I can. I am hit with so much religiosity. I can't even explain to you how much. So I have about a 30-minute drive home. And what it all has done has made me a stronger atheist. So I listen to atheist podcasts, atheist YouTube channels, atheist or other types of scientific books on Audible on my way home. And I'm so filled up with stuff and there's no outlet for that. This is my outlet. This is my self-care. I really don't care if I get outed. I'm not going to do anything.
You're not going to advertise it.
I'm not going to advertise it in my regular life, but I'm going to be here and I will. And Sunny Shell is not my real name. So I'm trying to protect myself to a degree. But if it happens, it happens and I'll deal with it when it comes. But I've got to have that way to be me. I just have to.
Well, I mean, look, I appreciate that. And, you know, as someone who understands a little bit about mental health, you and I kind of, I think, have maybe a similar educational background. So we both kind of understand coping mechanisms and the necessity of having them, especially when you're not using religion as a crutch, which I think a lot of us did at one point in our lives, and then had to realize, hey, I need other crutches, you know,
Right.
To serve that role. But yeah, people were chatting it out. If anyone has any questions for Sunny, by the way, please go ahead and ask them. We will be in here for a little while longer. And I wanted to know, Sunny, if you would be willing, since you're going to be a contributor to the show, I thought that we could maybe have a little fun and go over the argument of divine hiddenness, or really some of the excuses that theists make for why God doesn't reveal himself, you know, or why they can't produce evidence of God. And so there's a couple of arguments that I've continuously run into, and I figured we would go through them one by one, if you're willing to do that.
Of course, absolutely.
All right, so why don't we just take this opportunity to go into open discussion. All right, so when you were a kid, you believed in God because your parents told you there was a God. But at some point, you became skeptical. I'm sure all kids go through phases of skepticism, and then they either ask questions, and then their parents are like, make up, you know, some excuse, or point you to a Bible verse, or they tell you to go shut up and color and hope you forget. I don't know, just a lot of ways to deal with kids asking the wrong kinds of questions. But do you have a memory where you maybe first became skeptical about the God claim, where you like didn't really believe what they were telling you? You were still practicing, but didn't really believe?
Yes. So when I was little, I remember there was a girl who had been hit by a car, and she was, you know, young, and to me as a little girl, that was weird because kids aren't supposed to be hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said to my mom, why would God allow her to get hit by the car? And my mom said, well, God works in mysterious ways. And God needed his angel. And that just didn't make any sense to me.
Why does God need an angel?
Exactly.
Why does God need another angel?
That absolutely made no sense to me. And I think that thought has stuck with me always. I don't really understand, if God is a loving, caring God, why would he allow so much pain and suffering, needless pain and suffering, especially for children? You know, like I said, I work with kids who have been physically and sexually abused. And let me tell you, when I'm talking to a child and they're telling me their story, how can any God allow that?
I realized I didn't say this earlier when you mentioned that, so I want to take the opportunity to say it now. Thank you for what you do. Mm-hmm. Thank you for the service that you provide, because that's an invaluable service, and there's not a lot of people providing it relative to the number of people who suffer that type of abuse. I don't know a person who did not suffer some type of abuse. I think that we intuitively think that most people we know, you know, that being sexually abused is kind of a rare thing, and you know it probably happens to people out there, but it fortunately you're lucky enough that it hasn't happened to anyone you know. I think that we intuitively think that, and I think the reality is actually very different from that once you start talking to people, when they trust you enough to open up. Because almost every person I've talked to who I've trusted to the point where they would open up to me has revealed some sort of sexual trauma in either childhood or teenagers or in adulthood. I don't know. I literally don't know a person who wasn't sexually assaulted in some way or another. So I think it's an invaluable service, and I appreciate what you do, and there needs to be more people like you. So anyway,
thank you. I will say that I get the greatest privilege of seeing kids who come to our center hurting and seeing them leave our center with hope and healing. And so I am really, really honored to be able to do the work that I do. I get a rare, rare gift. So
right. Okay. So so that's what you became skeptical, basically, because you saw tragedy happen, and they just kind of explained it. Well, God works in mysterious ways. God needs new angels. What does God need with a starship? I don't know, but this is, that's a Star Trek reference. But, okay, so just to wrap that part of it up, my first moment of skepticism happened when I was watching the movie The 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston. It's something that used to come on like every year. Every year for Easter, we would watch The 10 Commandments. And I was totally into all of the supernatural stuff, and I didn't have a problem with God and burning bushes and parting of the Red Seas. And it was the moment, I've told the story a couple times, but it was the moment where after Moses rescues all the Israelites and he goes up on the mountain, and he's up there for like less than a month, and they're worshiping a golden calf that they had made conveniently. They found all this gold because, slaves that escaped slavery have all this gold, and they can just make golden calves in 30 days with no expertise. And they did that. They thought that was a good idea and started worshiping it for no reason. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? This makes no sense. Are we watching the same movie? Like, what's the explanation for this? And then the explanation never came in that movie. And so I'm like, okay, well, it's just a movie. And then I go to the Bible, and it's the same story in there, and there's no explanation for that in the Bible either. And so then I start asking people, I think I asked my grandmother, why are these people doing that? That doesn't make any sense. Like, why would they just saw the miracles and stuff. So why would they be, my 10, 11, 12-year-old brain is trying to figure out the logic of the behavior of these people in this story. And the explanation was like, oh, that's just the wickedness of man. So that's when I started having doubt. And I didn't press it because I knew everyone was just accepting this as though this made sense, and that's a poorly written story to me. That is a plot hole that doesn't seem to be resolved, and this is from a person who is willing to accept magic. Like I said, I'm cool with all the if I'm willing to believe that supernatural stuff could be, I'm very open-minded, but people behave in a certain way, and they're not that stupid. Like, even, yes, I believe that there's evil people. Yes, that I believe that there's stupid people, but the whole fucking nation all thought it was a good idea. That doesn't make any sense. And so there was never a good enough explanation for me for why to explain the behavior of the people in this story. And that's when I started to suspect that this was a fictional story. But beyond that, I never saw God. And I kept hearing about people seeing God or hearing God or having experiences with God or seeing movies where people are talking to God. And as somebody who really wanted to believe, I kept trying to pray for like a vision of God or for God to reveal himself to me in some kind of way. And it never happened. And I was I thought that, does God not like me? Is he like, what's going on here? And I just would get excuses like, oh, he works in mysterious ways. Pretty much the same thing you heard. But then I would start to ask other people, well, have you ever seen God? Like I've never seen him. So like, if you've seen him, like, what does he look like? And what did you do to make that happen? But they had never seen God either, And then, so everyone I knew that I would talk to when I would ask that never saw God. So I'm like, well, wait a minute. If nobody's ever seen him, what are we talking about here? Where is he? And how come we can't see him? And I think that's when somebody went to the Bible verse that said, no man can look upon God and live, or no one has seen God. There's like 2 or 3 places in the Bible where it's like, you can't see God, But then there's other places in the Bible where it says, and I've seen God face to face, but they didn't show me that part. They just wanted to satisfy the question that I was having there. So I was very confused by the fact that God couldn't be seen by some people, that the Bible says no man has seen him, that it simultaneously says that some men have seen him. He walked in the presence of Adam, so Adam saw him. Who else? I don't know if Job saw him, but certainly Satan saw him, and Adam and Eve saw both of them, right? So clearly some people could see him. Why couldn't I? Why can't anybody else? So the hiddenness of God, this is a fundamental classic problem in theism. It's a problem certainly for Christianity, which is all about evangelizing and making disciples of all nations, right? You have to be able to convince people, always be prepared to give the reasons that you believe, but do so with gentleness and respect. So if I can't see God and nobody else can see him, then what is the explanation for that? So were you ever really given an explanation besides God works in mysterious ways?
No. And in fact, as you were talking, I remembered, I told you I was at that non-denominational church. Mm-hmm. And when I started doubting, it was like, this just seems too kooky for me. I remember I was working second shift in a factory, and I went into the bathroom and I was just distraught because I was feeling like I was losing. I've gone through all these different churches and trying to find God. And then I had that experience, and it was just like, this doesn't seem real. And I remember saying, okay, that's it. God, if you are real, you have got to come and tell me, because I'm losing my faith. I'm losing any trust in you. And I just please. Mm-hmm. I had always heard that if you ask earnestly, that if you ask with all your heart and you open your heart, he will answer and he will be there.
I'm sorry, I'm reading Scapegoat's comment. God's hiding because he knows he doesn't exist, and it's embarrassing.
That's funny. Yeah. So I like cried, and I wanted with all of my heart, and it was silent and it was empty. And that's it.
It's pretty insulting when, a lot of theists will say things like, you never really believed, or you didn't believe hard enough, or you didn't pray hard enough, or there's something wrong with you that prevented you from doing it, or you just don't want to believe, or all these stupid kind of things. And it's really insulting when you think back at all that time you wasted because you were trying to make it happen because you wanted it to be true. I mean, I certainly wanted there to be a God, especially like I'm afraid of flying, and I fly all the time and I hate it. And the older I get, the more fearful I've become. It's really a irrational fear. I was in the Air Force for 21 years. You would think I would be okay with flying, but no, the older I get, the more of a fear there is. But I remember I used to pray before every flight, like, Lord, please let this flight be a good one, and I would just know that I would think that God was watching over me and protecting the flight, and, that I would arrive safely. I didn't really know that because I was still scared for the whole flight. So you would think that if I really believed it, I wouldn't be afraid anymore. But no, it was every time. So sure, I wanted there to be a God. It is very comforting to think that there is a God protecting you from, the bears in the forest when you're taking that hike. This is obviously before I read the part in the Bible where God sends bears to maul children. I didn't read that. I didn't know about that part in the Bible. So, but I would believe that I'll just pray and God will protect me. And it's a very comforting thought. And then coming out of belief is a little, uncomfortable, because then you realize there's no one watching over you, and you are at the mercy of the laws of physics, of the laws of timing, being in the right place at the right time. There's a little bit that's in your control. There's a lot of it that's in other people's control. And some of it is in the hands of nature, and that's very scary and difficult to deal with when you've grown up believing in a God your whole life, thinking that there was some sort of plan,
Yeah.
But I digress. The moments of skepticism, you talked about, you were on a search, you were trying to find God. Why should we have to find God? And I didn't, of course, I didn't start asking this question until I was an athist. You know, when you're a theist, you're just, the concern is finding him. If you haven't found him. Some theists say that they found him. Others, like me, I was on a constant search to find him. But it wasn't until I stopped believing that I started asking the question, why the hell do I need to find God? I can't see God. I can't hear him. He's everywhere. He can see everything, knows everything, all powerful, and wants to have a relationship with me. Why doesn't he find me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I never got that.
I don't understand that either. But that's also a great way to instill a sense of shame and guilt, because God will show himself to those who truly want to know him. And so if you have to search for him, then you must not be wanting to know him as much as you think you do, and you best be getting back on your knees.
So this is one of the 6 arguments I wrote that Christians and theists give to explain away the hiddenness of God. The argument is God can and does reveal himself to anyone, but only those who truly seek. He remains hidden from those who are not seeking. And it sounds like that's what you grew up hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the explanation for why you never found him, because you weren't really true enough, you weren't strong enough, your faith was too weak, whatever the case may be, or you were just pretending, or So this is an argument that probably works well in the theist's mind. If you're a theist who was raised in a Christian denomination to where that's something that your church taught you, that's something that you might think is reasonable. But as soon as you become an atheist and realize that that's not true, because most people who are atheists, who are honestly believers, know that that's not true. You don't even have to disprove that, because that's contradictory to your history. You know that you were an honest, and it was the process of seeking that led you to atheism. So that's obviously not an excuse that works. What about this idea that God provides special revelation to prophets, and he used these prophets and scribes to reveal his presence, and only the people that God select had direct revelation of God, and it's up to everyone else to exercise faith?
Well, I think that's very convenient. This is really convenient for those people who say that they're prophets.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same. It's not just with Christianity. I mean, you have
that's kind of like your religion,
medicine
right?
women. Yeah, it's like those
Seventh-day Adventist. What did she called herself? A prophetess?
A prophetess, yes.
Okay, I don't know why it has to be feminized. I thought prophet was unisex, but okay.
Well, it made her more special, probably. Mm-hmm. I just think it's really convenient for those people who, just like people who say that they can talk to the dead, or or whatever. It's really convenient for them. It's really crappy for the rest of us. And I think that when you are in it, you want it so badly that you end up feeling terrible because you're not receiving what you're supposed to. And it keeps you coming back to try to get that. And you can even lie to yourself without even realizing that you're lying to yourself.
Because at first you feel like a failure, right?
Exactly.
If everybody else sees God, or they're telling me they don't see him, but they know he's there. So, and they're telling me other people have seen him, and I'm not one of the ones that's seen him. And I feel like I'm being a good person. I'm being a good Christian. I'm doing all the things they're telling me. And for some reason, God's still not letting me see him. So it kind of seems like you failed.
Right. But then you can also tell yourself that you've seen him in different ways. You fool yourself because you want it so badly. So suddenly you see God everywhere, and you hear God. Pretty soon your own thoughts become God. You can't distinguish between whether it's you or God.
Yeah. And I mean, for example, I know that when I saw that homeless person on the street and I had $5 and I gave it to them, that was God, right? So all credit to God, because God allowed me to have $5 in my pocket at that moment. He allowed me to turn down this street and allowed me to recognize this person, and gave me that sense of God's will that this person needed $5 for lunch, right? And now that I'm an atheist, I have that exact same experience, I know that, no, that was just your humanity. and you saw somebody who needed food and you had $5 and you weren't going to do anything with it. And you would do the same thing whether you believed in a God or not. So it turns out that wasn't God.
Exactly. Just like when I know that my mom had talked recently to one of her old friends. They still have a lot of people who are in the Seventh-day Adventist religion. Mm-hmm. And she said it's interesting how if they're going to make a decision in their life, if it's a decision that they want, God's calling them. They're hearing God call them to that. And if it's the wrong decision, then there was a lesson that God was trying to get them to learn. There's always God, you create it in whatever situation that you have. You see God and hear God and know that that's what's going on. Everything is always God-given, God breathed.
When it's good, anyway.
Yeah.
If it's something bad, then it's not, right?
Well, sometimes it could still be God if it's bad because you were not following him correctly and he had to teach you a lesson, or he put that in your path. He's never going to give you more than you can handle, but he's putting in your path to provide a different blessing. Because if you didn't go through this trial and tribulation, you wouldn't have been steered to his will, what he really wants for you. There's no way for it to ever be not God breathed.
Sure. Okay. So now what about this one? Because this is another one I hear. God can't give direct evidence of his existence because then there would be no room for faith. And the Bible clearly says that blessed are those who believe without seeing. So Jesus values faith and he wants us to believe without seeing. Faith is the assurance for things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen. So we need to have faith. And if you give direct evidence, then you've pretty much destroyed faith. How about that one?
Okay.
Have you heard that one before?
Oh my gosh, yes. That one's like nails on a chalkboard for me, because in what area of your life other than this do you ever do that? I mean, people spend more time picking out what shoes they're going to wear than they do about mulling over this idea of faith. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. You're not just going to to say, well, faith is a wonderful thing when I'm trying to decide whether I'm going to drive with a blindfold on. I mean,
yeah.
We
don't use faith. We don't use faith for real world things. It seems to be the only thing to where faith becomes a good thing or a virtuous thing or something that seems like it might work,
Right.
I don't know why anybody would waste their time on faith. And it's also kind of a ridiculous argument in the sense that, the argument is, well, if you have evidence, then there would be no reason to have faith. And my response is yes. And there is no reason to have faith. So why doesn't he provide evidence? Like, wouldn't that be a better thing? If God actually wanted people to believe in him, why wouldn't he just give them evidence? Why insist on faith at all? What is the value of faith? And I'm going to steal from Matt Dillahunty. Faith is not a reliable path to truth. It's not. So why is it virtuous? Why would anyone promote that as this good thing that, you should feel blessed to have?
Well, it's funny that you bring this up because I had just come across, as I was driving home today, about 5 years ago when Objectively Dan was on. I
love him.
Oh, I do too. It was when he met with Anthony Magnabosco on Street Epistemology.
Okay.
And it was he was a theist at that time at that college that Anthony often goes to and interviews students.
I'm going to have to look that up because I haven't.
Oh, you've got to see it. It was awesome because he was with his friend. It was Daniel. It wasn't Dan. It was Daniel at the time and Bo. And they were talking about faith, and he basically that's the entire basis for belief in God. And Anthony kept asking them, but what is faith really a reliable way to find truth? And Bo said, well, without faith, what else is there? And you can see the light bulb go off.
Ding, ding, ding.
He just kind of looked at him and jerked. It was the funniest thing. And then he went back to being, a theist, because you can't just knock yourself out of it like that. It takes a while.
Yeah.
But you saw the moment, the light bulb. What you've got to watch that. It was the most fascinating.
It's probably a moment of skepticism that he had never had before.
Exactly. It was just like, wait a minute, without faith, what else is there? That means that there is nothing. There's nothing. There's no foundation. Mm-hmm. Bo had said something about, but if you believe in the Big Bang, you have a level of faith there too. It's like, no,
not really.
Have evidence.
Yeah, we can see the expansion of the universe. We can literally get a telescope.
You measure it. There's measurements, and everything that we have so far shows that there was. I don't think they call it a Big Bang anymore. Just the moment of expansion, of rapid expansion. But we base that. It's not faith. It's a level of confidence that is measured by the amount of evidence that you have.
Right.
And so I'm very careful in my day-to-day discussions with people. I never say faith. I always say confidence, because faith is exactly what you said. It's not having any basis, any foundation to build a belief on. Confidence, on the other hand, has to do with, and you can have a high degree or a low degree, but it's all based on a foundation of available evidence. And how
you think that might make people suspicious? Because I'm sure the people around you talk about faith all the time, and if you're never saying the word faith and you're only ever saying confidence, that they might be scratching their heads. What is up with Sunny?
Oh, well, I think that they do, because I also have people every day who say, "Have a blessed day." I have, glory to God. I mean, we'll get a big donation and they'll say, "Thank you, God." And I'll just smile. I will not engage in that. I may not be able to speak my mind, but I will not engage in it. So, I won't. I will never say faith. I don't say. Now, I will say that I have a problem saying, "Oh, bless," because that's something that we say. Bless it. It's just kind of you almost can't help it. It's like saying,
I still say bless you when people sneeze.
Exactly.
But I do it as a like a platitude or it's just an expression. It doesn't mean really anything to me. I don't even think it means anything to them. Like people who, when I was a theist, when I was a Christian theist and somebody sneezed, I would say bless you, but I didn't think I was doing anything to the person. I didn't think that Jesus was doing anything. I was only saying it because I knew that was the response when somebody sneezed, and I didn't even know why. It's just tradition, and that's why I carry on that response.
Here, everybody has always heard of "bless your heart," "bless her heart," and that's actually an underhanded thing.
Well, right, because depending on where you are, that is a backhanded insult, right? I learned that too.
It is, but here we shorten it to just bless.
Okay.
It's just bliss, and that can be both a good thing or a bad thing. So if you say somebody did something stupid, "Oh, this person, I saw them, they cut somebody off," bliss. It's always bliss. But it can also be, "Oh, this person did something so sweet to this other person," oh, bliss. And it becomes something that's almost like aw or geez. And I have a hard time with that because it's just something I have grown up around. I can't help it. And so I will catch myself going, "Bless. Oh, crap, I did it again." So that's a habit. That's the only thing that I do that has any kind of a religious connotation to it. Anything else I'm very, very careful with, and I'm really hoping I can get away from that. I hate it when I do it. But
Sunny, there are other apologetics for why God is hidden. I mean, it could be one of the other ones we mentioned. Those don't really seem to work out so well. But what about this argument that the evidence for God is all around us? It's revealed through his creation. Look at the order in the universe. Look at the trees. Look at how everything seems to make sense. It's just that some people like you just deny the evidence. You're suppressing the truth and righteousness, but there's evidence for God all around us. How else do you explain the order?
Well, we actually know how the universe works pretty well. I mean, we have a lot of science, and it's not just one type of, I think that's what people forget, is science is not just science. You have, geology, biology,
Astronomy,
anthropology.
physics.
Exactly. You have all of these things and they build on each other. It's like a big puzzle piece, and it's all forming that foundation that I talked about before. So you can look at a tree and think, wow, it's just so complex and so beautiful. Only a God could have done it, except that we know how trees, we actually know this. It's not mysterious. And every time that we find out new things, the place for God, the God gap gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So, if you want to look at that and think how wondrous it is, it's wondrous in all of its beautiful nature.
I like the point that you made about the independent sciences and how, science is often talked about as though it's this collective thing. Oh, you believe in science. Well, no, the reason we have good reasons to recognize that the universe is old isn't just because we know the rate of radiometric decay and we can date rocks. It isn't just because we have ice core samples that show us that the periods of the different ice ages, and each one of these rings represents a year and it goes back billions of years. It isn't just, well, in the case of ice cores, I think they can go back a couple, like tens of thousands, but same thing. It's longer than 6,000 to 10,000 years. It isn't just because of the speed of light constant and the fact that we know that if we can see Proxima Centauri, that it takes at least 4 years for that light to get to us. Therefore, if we can see Andromeda, it's taking millions of years. It's all of these things together. All of them are telling us that the Earth is pretty fucking old. It's not 6,000 years old. We have trees that are 6,000 years old, but so clearly the Earth is older than that. Science is a collection of different independent studies that all use the scientific method, which seems to be the best method, or I should say the scientific methods. But falsification, having a null hypothesis, trying to understand what a non-God designed universe would look like. If you're going to posit that everything was designed by God and you're going to say, look at all the evidence, what would you expect to see if there was no God? How would it look different? And this is the question they can't ever seem to answer. We're going to wrap up in about 3 minutes, but I just want to do one more argument because I wrote down a bunch of them. Actually, I have 2 more, and these will be quick. So the other one is, well, God can't reveal himself directly because that would take away free will. And if everybody knows there's a God, then they would have no choice but to follow him.
Well, I completely disagree with that because if someone was to demonstrate to me adequately to where I could understand it, and it was, verifiable evidence where I could not disprove. I mean, I have to believe in a God. That doesn't mean that I'm going to follow that God.
Yeah, any more than it meant that Satan was going to follow God, right?
Exactly.
I mean, Satan knows there's a God according to the story, and he's clearly rebelling against God. So,
well, there were people all throughout the Bible that rebelled against God, and they knew that God was real.
Yeah, right? including Adam and Eve, right?
Exactly.
The first people.
So, if you have free will, if free will is actually a thing, which is debatable.
I was going to say, is it?
Yeah.
We don't have to go there. We'll have that discussion on another discussion, but go ahead.
But if free will is a thing, it's not dependent on whether or not a God is real, because you still have the ability to decide whether you're going to worship said God. You have that ability. So it's just ridiculous that argument, I think, is dead from the get-go. Yeah.
And then the last one that I'm aware of, I'm sure there are many more than this, but these seem to be the most common 6. And this is, I think this is, well, no, I don't want to straw man him, so I won't put a name to it. But the argument is that, no evidence for God is really needed because everyone already knows that there's a God. He's written his law in our hearts. So even babies are born believing in God. So why would you ask for evidence for the thing that you already know?
That's probably the worst argument ever. That is so condescending.
It's basically a way to get out of doing anything, I think.
Right. It is. It absolutely is. And then, of course, then you have to go back to if you believe that everybody is already born knowing that there is a God that he's written on their heart, then what's the point of any of this? I mean, really, what is the point of any of the religions? What's the point of all the denominations? It makes no sense. None of it makes sense.
And specific to Christianity, what's the point of evangelism? What's the point of the Great Commission? What's the point of go ye therefore and make disciples of all nations? If everyone already knows there's a God, why is the Bible talking about unbelievers? How can there be unbelievers if everyone knows there's a God? That kind of doesn't add up, So I think that argument really cannibalizes itself, and it's clearly just a way for them to admit that there is no evidence. They can't produce any evidence. There's no real good reason to believe this, so you're just going to say, well, you already know, so I don't have to provide evidence,
Right.
So,
exactly.
So it may be
it's condescending too. It's basically just
they don't care about that though.
You're right. Yeah, true. It's the most condescending. It just makes you want to punch somebody in the eye. And I'm not a violent person, but it makes me want to punch somebody in the eye.
Right. Sunny Shell, this was a pleasure. I was very happy that you came on. I'm glad that you are going to be interacting with us more. I look forward to hearing you make some of those arguments in the future. And if we get a host, if we get a guest on and you feel like you want to co-host at any time or ask some questions, let me know and we'll put you in the second seat. And this was great. There was a lot of great comments here. People appreciated your input and they have a lot to look forward to on the upcoming episodes. So anything else that you would like to promote? You're not writing a book about this. You're kind of keeping a low profile. You're kind of like, not in the closet anymore, but really not trying to promote yourself.
Yeah. I'm not trying to promote myself in my personal life where I'm at. But I really do want to be, I want to be an atheist activist.
Okay.
And I want to be on YouTube much more, just under this pseudonym until I ever get to the point where I can do more. But this is a big part of, like I said, my self-care. We all need to have self-care, mental, physical self-care. And this is mine. This is what I need in my life. So I'm excited.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you recognize that about yourself, because we're kind of fortunate that we have both had some sort of psychology training and recognizing the need for coping mechanisms. So I guess maybe the advantage of that is you can immediately step to what you know. And this is cathartic. I think it's one of the reasons why a lot of us do it, So I think we have Oz, who is the owner of TANG, our parent channel here, and he would like to come on and say hi to you. So, Oz.
Good evening. How's everybody?
Hi.
Doing great. Good to see you.
Good. You too. You too. Great episode, guys.
He's my boss.
Oh,
yours too.
Yeah. Hey, boss.
If I'm that, I'm the easiest boss you've ever.
I call him Oz, the great and powerful.
No, we're all doing this together. We're all rowing this boat together. So it is what it is. But Sunny, that was the first time I got to hear a little more in depth your story. So thank you for sharing that. Very very insightful for me to get to know, also the viewers, but also for those in the future that we can refer back and say, hey, if you want to know more about Sunny, here's the episode you can go to and have that point of reference. But really why I'm here is to say welcome. And I'm excited for what you're going to bring to the table. I know Wes had told me what you're helping with EA show before, and I think what you bring on screen and off screen is a great addition. I think you're going to be you're going to be one of those where it's the rising tide raises all ships. So you're going to be one of those pieces that continue to help raise the tide, because there's stuff that you do that I suck at, and it's like, it's good to have those people, because this is all one big puzzle. We're just trying to put the puzzle pieces in the right place. So it's going to be exciting. Great to have you on board, and let's rock and roll, man.
Absolutely. Awesome. This is exciting.
Absolutely. Let's give classes on kicking asses, Bryce.
Hey, I'll try. Look, I'm not always right. I'm just right most of the time, So yeah, that's kind of I'm still waiting to be proved wrong, but I know it can happen. I know I've been wrong before. I was wrong in 1994. I thought Stargate was going to be a sucky movie, and it turned out to be good. So I'm not always right.
Yes, and Asexual Atheist just said it is one of my favorite. It's one of the cheesiest quotes ever, but it's one of my favorite ones. Teamwork makes the dream work. And yeah, when you got a bunch of people that are humble and want to have the same goals, same aspirations in mind, it's many hands make light work. So yeah.
I actually don't know that one. That's good. Oh, okay. Many hands, like numerous hands. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah.
Okay. What did you think he said?
I thought he said many hands, like tiny hands make things work. I'm like, how does that? That's an interesting one. But, okay.
Trump hands.
I know words. Words.
I have the best words.
I'd have to get you one of those little mini hand plastic things that you can smack yourself in the face with.
And while we are live, to take one more second, Bryce, you've been kicking ass, man. Great job so far in the content, and obviously I told Skids and Wes that they're sure they have one under their belt. They're working on the next one here, but those are two different monsters, doing pre-recorded and doing live, and they both have pros and cons. But you've been killing it, man. Great job.
Thank you, and that's the plan going forward, and that's why I needed somebody of Sonny's intelligence and wisdom and charm to kind of help me do that. So yeah, we're all looking forward to it. And with that, I'm probably going to go ahead and close out. Guys, if you enjoyed this show, hit the like button. Please like the show. Like Sonny. Like it for Sonny. Even if it's not for me, just click the like button. And as always, you can catch me and sometimes Sonny back on The Bryce is Right. We are on Tuesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And don't forget to subscribe to TANG, the Atheist Network group. For producer Wes, Skids the Clown, and Sonny Shell, this is Bryce Cornell saying, don't forget to have your God spayed or neutered.